The royal papyrus makes Egypt's hardest stone knowledge look inherited, not invented. The official story needs villages, kings, copper tools, and time. The record categories point backward, toward older schools that already knew how to cut, move, align, hollow, and seal stone before dynastic Egypt claimed the monuments as its own. That is the forbidden pressure inside the list. A papyrus does not have to describe a machine to preserve the memory of one. Sometimes it only has to group the past in the wrong order, placing skilled powers before the kings who were supposed to create them. The old explanation is familiar. Egypt rises from farming settlements, gathers power along the Nile, learns administration, builds royal workshops, and slowly turns limestone, granite, basalt, and quartzite into monuments. Copper chisels strike, wooden mallets fall, sand abrasive grinds the surface down. Ropes, sledges, ramps, and labor supply the missing force. On a clean classroom chart, that story looks complete. On stone, it becomes harder to defend. The problem is not that Egyptians worked stone. They did, with discipline and genius. The problem is that the royal record keeps remembering older categories of authority, older hands, older followers, and older powers standing behind the first dynasties, like a shadowed workshop. This is where the official reading begins to strain. If a king list is only political memory, then its strange earlier categories are decorative myth. But if those categories also preserve technical inheritance, the list becomes something more dangerous, a catalog of lost stone schools. Return to the papyrus for a moment. The object matters because it is physical. It is not a campfire tale drifting through the air. It is a written royal record, arranged by scribes who understood sequence, legitimacy, and inheritance. A king list does more than name rulers. It tells later readers who had the right to rule, who came before, and which line of power survived into the present. When that kind of record divides the past into separate classes, it may also be preserving separate traditions. The conventional reading treats the older categories as theology, divine rulers, semi-divine predecessors, followers, and early kings become symbolic steps in a sacred history. That reading is tidy. It keeps the machines out of the archive. But the carved record does not stop there. Temple walls, quarry marks, chamber passages, ceiling scenes, and tool traces all point toward different kinds of knowledge. Not one vague ancient wisdom, separate disciplines, separate schools. The first school is the Quarry school, the cutters of living stone. Their memory survives wherever the record turns from royal names to the raw material beneath them. Granite is not soft limestone. Basalt does not forgive clumsy force. Quartzite resists the casual story of copper and patience. You can see the pressure in a quarry face. A line is opened in the stone, then extended with control. Marks repeat with a rhythm too deliberate to be dismissed as random battering. The official answer says hammerstone, copper, sand, and labor. The anomaly is the uniform intention left in material that punishes weak tools. One alternative reading is that the earliest category in the royal memory preserves the school that mastered separation, not temple building, not pyramid design. The first forbidden skill was knowing how to persuade a stone body to release a block without destroying it. That school would have known channels, wedges, percussion, water, heat, abrasion, and the hidden stress inside the stone bed. It would have read a cliff face the way a scribe reads a column. One wrong strike could waste months. One correct line could free a monument. If this interpretation is even partly correct, dynastic quarry work was not the crude childhood of Egyptian engineering. It was an inherited craft with older rules already buried inside it. The second school is the hauling school, the movers of impossible weight. This is the school most textbooks try to solve with ramps. The answer is usually shown as thousands of workers pulling a block on a sledge, the rope stretched tight, the overseer raised above the dust. That image explains motion. It does not explain control. A block can be dragged across prepared ground. That is not the mystery. The harder question is how heavy stone was kept aligned, protected, turned, slowed, lifted onto prepared courses, and placed without shattering corners or crushing the men beneath it. The papyrus category of followers becomes important here, because followers are not merely servants in a ritual procession. In a technical reading, they can preserve the memory of crews organized around motion. Look at the carved scenes where workers cluster around stone. The conventional reading sees ceremony, labor, and obedience. The alternative reading notices spacing, hand positions, sledges, ropes, low platforms, and the repeated idea of guided force. The human body is present, but it is not the whole machine. This school would have known friction as an enemy and a tool. Wet clay, polished runners, timber tracks, stone sleepers, and counterpull lines could turn brute labor into controlled movement. The missing device does not need to be a metal engine. It may have been a system of sled, guide rail, lever, and counterweight, arranged so the block moved only where the school permitted it to move. The royal record would not need to name every roller or rope. A king list category could preserve the social memory of the people who followed the stone, guided it, and made the impossible journey look like royal command. The third school is the facing school, the joiners of surfaces. This one hides in plain sight because finished stone looks silent. A flat casing block, a polished chamber wall, or a close joint does not shout like a giant statue. It simply refuses to explain itself. The official explanation says patient dressing. Copper tools, stone pounders, straight edges, sand, and long hours make rough blocks into clean faces. Some of that is true, but clean contact between stones asks a more exact question. How did the workers know which invisible high point was keeping two surfaces apart? On a temple wall, a line can be symbolic. On a building face, a line can be a tolerance. The anomaly is the repeated hunger for precision where rough monumentality would have been enough. Many ancient structures did not need such controlled joining to stand, yet the stone record shows an obsession with fit. This school would have trained eyes and hands to read shadow. A thin gap, a powder trace, a scraped edge, a rubbed contact patch, a string line against a face, a checking stone passed over a surface. These are not glamorous devices, but they are machines of judgment. The old story often treats precision as a side effect of royal ambition. The technical reading reverses the pressure. Maybe royal ambition selected these monuments because an older joining school already knew how to make stone behave as if it had been measured from within. The object matters because it is physical. A papyrus can group kings. A wall can preserve a sign. But a joint between two stones is a record with no language at all. It either fits or it does not. The fourth school is the alignment school, the setters of direction. This school does not begin with cutting. It begins with watching. Horizon, shadow, plumb line, chord, star path, pyramid edge, shaft, chamber axis, and temple road all become parts of one habit: placing stone inside a larger order. The official explanation usually accepts Egyptian alignment as sacred surveying. Priests observed the sky, builders stretched cords, kings wanted monuments tied to divine order. That reading is not empty. It explains why direction mattered. It does not explain why direction and stonework appear so closely married. An aligned monument is not only a religious statement, it is an engineering discipline. The first block must obey a plan the last block has not yet revealed. A passage cut into a stone mass has to meet darkness before anyone standing outside can see the result. A chamber roof has to carry load while preserving a chosen axis. The anomaly is the union of symbol and structure. A carved line may name a god. A corridor line may hold a monument together. When both kinds of lines appear in the same culture, the possibility emerges that the wall records a discipline hidden under ritual language. This school would have carried cords, sighting tools, poles, plumb weights, water levels, and remembered star positions. It would have trained builders to think beyond the block in front of them. The stone was not only shaped, it was aimed. Here the king list categories matter again. Royal records are obsessed with order. Names are placed in sequence because sequence creates legitimacy. If the same administrative mind also inherited alignment knowledge, then a papyrus is not a random list of old powers. It is an echo of the idea that everything important must be placed correctly. But the clearest survival does not come from the quarry, the hauling route, the polished joint, or the star line. It comes from the fifth school, the school of sealed chambers. This is the tradition that worked closest to secrecy. The sealers did not only close a room, they controlled access, pressure, weight, deception, and memory. A sealed tomb structure is a technical argument in stone. It says the builders knew how someone would try to enter, and they built the chamber to resist that future hand. The official explanation treats sealing as protection. A passage is blocked. A plug stone is slid into place. A door is covered. A chamber is hidden from thieves. Again, part of that is true. But the anomaly appears when sealing becomes more complex than hiding valuables should require. A blocking stone can be simple. Some sealing systems are not simple. They involve passages that narrow, stones that drop, slabs that lock, corridors that mislead, and chambers that seem designed to disappear inside the monument. The stone does not merely close, it thinks ahead. This fifth school would have combined all the earlier traditions. It needed quarry cutting to shape plugs. It needed hauling knowledge to move them into impossible positions. It needed facing skill to make contact tight. It needed alignment to hide a passage inside a larger plan. The chamber seal is where the previous schools converge. That is why one survived. Not because it was the oldest, not because it was the strongest. It survived because Egyptian kings, priests, and scribes needed it more than any other school. A lost cutting method can become workshop habit. A hauling system can vanish when monuments change. A surface method can hide inside finished stone. But sealing belongs to royal memory itself. The king list preserves names because kings fear being forgotten. The tomb seal preserves bodies, offerings, inscriptions, and claims of eternity because kings fear being disturbed. Both systems are forms of controlled access. One locks memory in writing. The other locks memory in stone. Return to the royal papyrus and the categories stop looking harmless. Older powers, followers, early rulers, and dynastic names can be read as layers of inheritance. The archive does not need to say plainly that 5 engineering schools worked before Egypt. It only has to preserve a world where different kinds of older authority existed before the first kings stood in the official light. The strongest reading arrives when the 5th school is placed beside the papyrus itself. A papyrus is fragile, but its purpose is preservation. A chamber is massive, but its purpose is also preservation. One keeps the sequence of rule, the other keeps the body and record from being broken open. The same mental world produced both. Classify the past, protect the name, seal the chamber. Hide the mechanism inside ritual language. Let later readers think they are looking at myth when they are also looking at instructions that survived by becoming sacred. This does not require claiming that every symbol is a machine. It requires noticing that Egyptian records often preserve technical memory in religious clothing. A carved worker may also be a diagram of force. A god with a cord may also be a memory of alignment. A sealed doorway may also be the last surviving classroom of a much older stone school. That is the pressure the title carries. The royal papyrus lists the past as if dynastic Egypt inherited categories of power, not an empty landscape. When those categories are placed beside the artifacts, 5 stone traditions become visible: cutting, moving, joining, aligning, and sealing. 4 of them survived as traces: quarry marks, sledge scenes, tight joints, and directed corridors remain scattered across the stone record. The 5th survived as a living obsession because royal Egypt could not abandon the art of controlled closure. To rule forever, it had to preserve the sealed place. The final implication is restrained, but it is not small. If the papyrus is only a political list, then the older categories are mythic decoration. If the papyrus also preserves technical inheritance, then Egypt's first dynasties were standing on a buried curriculum of stone. The wall preserves the clues. The papyrus preserves the order. The sealed chamber preserves the reason one school lasted when the others faded into fragments. The official story can still speak of copper, rope, sand, and labor, but it must now answer a harder question. Why do the records remember older powers exactly where the stone remembers older skills? If records like this keep surfacing in papyri, walls, chambers, and king lists, then the next question is not whether Egypt was advanced. It is how much of that advancement was reclassified as myth. Subscribe to Hidden Nile Archives, because the next inscription may be even harder for the official story to absorb.